For those who don't know, I'm Annie Costabile, multimedia journalist for the Chicago Sun-Times and host of this here podcast, Equal Play. And I'm thrilled to be bringing you this very special episode in partnership with Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy's Winter Meetings Women in Baseball series. Wow, we got a shout out from the pup. Love it. But CBEA is a nonprofit founded by former MLB All-Star and Chicagoland native Curtis Granderson, and it's dedicated to providing baseball accessibility to inner city children and youth in Chicago. So Curtis has and will continue to be doing great work here in Chicago. And our guest this week is former pro with the Chicago Bandits, college softball coach at Holy Names University in Valparaiso, and current Cubs minor league hitting coach, pioneer, industry leader, Rachel Folden. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Man, that was a huge mouthful, and obviously people aren't tuning in right now to hear me talk, so let's get to some questions. You made history as the first woman coach hired by the Cubs ahead of the 2020 season, but you obviously had to work and build towards that position. It didn't just get handed to you. So let's start from the beginning. When did you develop a passion for this game, both baseball and softball?
It started pretty young. We have kind of a baseball family. My dad's a big baseball fan. We grew up Dodger fans, and my brother played baseball, my older brother. And so I played baseball with myself and my brother, who's the same age as me. He's technically my stepbrother. And so we just played like Little League growing up. I played baseball until I was about 12. And at that point, basketball was my best sport. And so I stopped playing baseball. And then my basketball coach asked me to play softball. So that's how I got involved in softball. And so I just played until I couldn't play anymore.
I read a few stories about you, and that transition from baseball to softball was not one that you were super excited about at first. So can you describe making that transition and that energy that is put on women, young women, of you have to at some point transition from baseball to softball?
Yeah, I mean, I hated softball. I thought it was the dumbest sport. In my mind, I thought of slow pitch softball. Like I had no one in my family, no friends, nothing that played fast pitch whatsoever. So I just thought it was dumb. I played softball on my middle school team and it was slow pitch. And so that was like my only knowledge of it. And I was just like, nah, it's boring. Like baseball is better. But it got old being like every single time we'd roll up to a field, it would be like, oh, that team has a girl on it. Oh, and I was never praised for my ability or anything like that. It was always just, wow, she throws really hard for a girl, or, it just got old. And I loved the game. But at that point, I was terrible at it, by the way. I was awful. I think my last season of Little League Baseball, I didn't get a single hit. I love to tell my 12 and 13-year-olds that story because it's the truth. I went 0 for the season. It was awful. And I had really like thrived on the basketball court. So I just kept playing basketball. And even when my coach asked me, I told him, no, I did not want to play on his softball team. I did not I had no desire to play softball. My softball's stupid. And all it took was, he goes, yeah, you're probably not very good at it anyway. And that was all I needed to hear. And then I was like, okay, like I'll come play. Let's see what this is all about. And all of a sudden I fell in love with it because it was like, wow, I'm surrounded by women. Like everybody looks like me and we're all going through the same things. And it wasn't like this big deal that I could do this with the little asterisk next to it that said for a girl. I belonged. And so I fell in love with the sport.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And I laughed out loud reading that part of the story when your coach hit you with the, oh, don't worry about it, you're probably not that good anyway. And it's like the competitor in you was like, screw that. Let me show you what's up.
He knew what he was doing too. He knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
But that brings up such an interesting point, in that you felt at home playing softball. It wasn't about, oh, she's good for a girl. You were playing on a team where it was only about your performance. And I wonder for you, how important it is for the future of women in baseball that we provide those opportunities for women to play baseball on teams filled with women instead of if you're a young woman who has the desire to play baseball, you are going to have to do it on a young man's team. It's similar to football in that regard. So I wonder what your perspective is on that and how important it is, again, for the growth of the sport and for women in the sport to invest in teams and that are made up of women.
Yeah, I was on another podcast actually with the International Women's Baseball Center, and we kind of touched on this question a little bit. I would love to see women's baseball make a comeback. I don't think it necessarily has to be men play baseball, women play softball.
Mhm.
This was actually one of the things that I wrote my thesis on when I was a senior in college, like to graduate, because I was a history major. Was like, why did we hand baseball to men and we gave softball to women? And I think there's a play. They're two different sports, so there's a place for women in baseball just like there's a place for men in softball. There's men's fast pitch that not a lot of people know about. I mean, we know a lot about it in the Chicagoland area,
Mhm.
but there's not, it's not a huge nationwide presence. It's a sport that both genders can play. And I think, like, in this case, hires like myself and Rachel Valkovec and Alyssa Nakin and all of these, women that have gotten hired, it's just increases the representation that, like, hey, there's someone out there that's doing baseball. And so I think I can go play baseball too. But I wish there were more opportunities for women to just thrive and play on a women's sport, on a women's baseball team. I would have loved that. If you would have given me that opportunity, I never would have switched to softball.
Definitely. And I think that's the most important takeaway, is that we need to provide opportunities for young women to see it and then be it. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's a huge issue with this lack of representation, is it's taking dreams out of young women's heads. Transitioning, as a woman in baseball and softball, when did this dream to coach in the majors manifest? When did you first start to think about this as a future career possibility?
So I had been coaching, just like I coached in college, hated coaching in college, by the way, loved coaching, hated recruiting, hated all the red tape that you got to go through and like recruiting. Like, I just hated it. So I
Yeah.
just decided I wanted to coach. So I opened up my own business, started giving lessons.
Right.
That grew. And I've always been pretty darn curious. Like, I've never been one of those players that was just like, well, I was really good, so just do what I do. I coached like that for a little while. I wish I didn't, but I've learned some things since then, hopefully. And I started to reach out to coaches that were doing things better than me, and that's like, if you can't beat them, join them, kind of thing. And so it led me to getting connected with Travis Kerber and Justin Stone, who run a company called Elite Baseball in Chicago.
Mhm.
And when we met, they sat down, and I've sat down with numerous, like, batting cages in the area, facilities in the area, who all want to bring me in, and they just want my rental. And so they, that's it. They just wanted, hey, I want you to use our cage. We're going to charge you this and you can do whatever you want. Nobody was really providing me with any resources to get better.
Mhm.
And so when I was approached by them, it was initially to expand their softball reach into Northwest Indiana, which I was all about because I loved what they were doing. They were very technology forward. They were very, intuitive, creative, and I just loved them. Like, I hung out with them and I loved them. And I said, yeah, I want to do this. But I want to be involved on the baseball side, because they were having all of this tech, all of these, they were consulting at this time for Major League Baseball teams, college baseball teams, but nothing like that existed for softball yet. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I said, well, if you're gonna let me in on the softball side, I want to be in on the baseball side. And it was an immediate yes. And they really, like, just kind of involved me in the baseball side. And so then I started just hanging out with them and learning as much as I could, driving up to Chicago as often as I could to just get my hands on all of this technology. And
Mhm.
so then fast forward a couple years, Stoney gets hired by the Cubs to be their director of hitting, and he
Right.
needs to fill minor league coaching roles. And part of his job was to bring in all of this tech and people who actually know how to use it, communicate it, coach with it. And so suddenly I became very qualified for a job that became available in baseball.
Uh-huh.
And, it kind of just lockstep fit in line. And since I already had this, previous relationship with him, I was able to at least know about the position that was
Right.
available. and then I got the interview, and then I ended up getting the position. So it was actually a very like fortunate set of events that set that in motion. But yeah, my desire to work in baseball has always been present. I've coached a few, baseball players here and there that it's like a brother of a softball player, and dad will let them come in for a couple lessons, but it's usually not very like consistent. But I've always wanted to work more on the baseball side just because it's the sport that I grew up loving.
Right.
I'm a huge baseball fan, so it just seemed to fit, and it just kind of worked out where I could get, into baseball.
Definitely. So I'm curious then, like as a very, very young player, were you dreaming of coaching in the majors, or did you not even have that dream on your radar? And then, because of the work you were putting into the sport and growing as a coach and the evolution of your career, this dream popped up in your head?
Well, I didn't want to coach in baseball when I was a kid. I wanted to play Major League Baseball when I was a kid. I wanted to play for the Dodgers. So there's always been that, like, I think I played softball a little bit with that
Okay.
chip on my shoulder. But when I started to coach, I had toyed with the idea of like, I wonder if I applied for like a college baseball coaching position, if someone would take me seriously, or, something like that. But I never really like, it was never like a dream like I've always had. It's like on a post-it on my mirror that I look at every single day. But when the opportunity presented itself, it was like, yeah, I would love to do this.
And
Like
you
I
were
would
ready.
absolutely love, and I was ready. And I think, like when those opportunities come along, if I'm qualified and I know that I can do it, or at least in my mind I know I can do it. Yeah, I'm gonna absolutely go for it because I'm not naive to the impact that this has on bringing women into sports and bringing women into previously thought of as like male only sports. I'm not like, I understand the importance of that for sure, but like for me it's just literally like I get to coach baseball. Like that
Right.
seems awesome. I get to be a small part of hopefully, bringing another World Series to Chicago. That would be amazing, right? Like I get to do that. I'm in.
Sign me up.
Sign me up.
Backtracking just a little bit because I don't want to wash over any part of your career. You've had, a hugely impactful career playing and coaching, but you played 5 seasons in the National Pro Fast Pitch League while also coaching. And I'd love for you to describe that grind of coaching and playing, because a lot of people don't understand that women a lot of times have to supplement their professional career with another job in order to even be a pro. So for you, what was that grind like of balancing a professional career and also a coaching career?
Yeah, I think for me, I was pretty fortunate, like, especially during my time at Valpo, I had coaches that really supported and kind of just let me go play for the summer.
Mhm.
And so that was nice. Training for it is the hard part. So, like, going and playing in the summer, like, we all kind of have to have jobs with bosses or with program departments that understand that we're not going to be available for a lot of the summer, send us out on a couple of recruiting trips here and there. Maybe
Mhm.
we miss a couple games. Like it all works out pretty well. But the training for it is the hard part, and trying to find time to train and trying to find time to like get live at bats. It was a lot of fun when I was at Valpo because I remember having like the pitchers. I would be like, hey, do you mind if I hop in and hit? And it's like, yeah, it'll make the pitchers better. It'll help me get better. And it was kind of like a mutual, relationship, and just staying involved in the game, catching their bullpens because I was a catcher, just staying involved, hopping in a scrimmage if we need an extra player. The training part is the hard part. I think just finding time to do it because especially during the season, because the college season is a grind.
Right.
It is 80 hours a week. You're getting off of the bus at 3 a.m. and then you have to get up and get to the office by 8 a.m. I mean, it is a grind. And so finding that time to train and recover and do whatever you need to do, that was the most difficult part for sure.
Did you see your career as a pro impacting your players at all? Would they, look at what you were doing and I don't know, have questions for you about how to get there and see themselves essentially in you in a different way? You weren't just a coach, you were also a player showing them the way of how they could, pursue the same career that you had.
I think it helped. I mean, I would like to think that it helped. I think more than anything, it helped me relate to them.
Yeah.
Watching them struggle and go, 0 for 15 and wonder if they're ever going to get a hit again. I know what that feels like. I just did that, like last summer. That was part of my life. So, and I think what really helped me, and something that I had never experienced before, was I had a bad injury. I had a thumb injury that ended my season early, and I remember like completely understanding, like, dang, I understand what it feels like as a player to go through an injury. I'd
Right.
never done that before. And so that really helped me kind of like be a little bit more empathetic as a coach, as to like players who miss games. Like, it sucks.
Right.
It sucks to miss games, and it sucks to watch your team go. And in my case, like, I was sitting at home rooting for everybody to win a championship, but like watching them bear hug and dogpile on the field, like I wasn't there.
Right.
Like that was hard. That was hard to watch. So, just kind of understanding that perspective, because I've always been the kind of player that's like, oh, you're injured, like get over it and get on the field kind of thing. Whereas, now I kind of understood, like, oh, I get it. I get what you're going through. So I think it just helped me connect with players a little bit better.
Yeah, gave you an added layer of empathy, which, in the long term, all those lessons along the way prepare you for that present opportunity, which, as we know, is with the Cubs right now. You've experienced, though, a lot of historic moments, I'm sure, in your career, but one that I think stands out to many is catching Jenny Finch's perfect game in 2009. And everyone's attention, I think rightfully so, immediately goes to the pitcher who threw the perfect game. But as her catcher, how were you approaching each inning, each pitch, and what are some of your memories from that game?
So when you're dealing with a pitcher like Finch, who's,
Yeah.
she has to have thrown like 20, 30 perfect games in her career, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's just insanely good. So when
Phenomenal.
you're phenomenal, right? So you get through the first time through the order, you get through the first, 3 innings, and you're like, okay, we're cruising. Like, I understand what's going on, but like, it's the first time through the order. You get through the second time through the order, you get about halfway through, and you start to realize, like, we're in the fifth inning and like nobody's gotten on base yet. So you start to understand it. And then, you start to like, we had a couple really good plays in that game, that kind of saved that perfect game. But it was like, when you're doing it, you're kind of just like, it does not matter what finger I put down right now. She's just gonna, like, she's just on today. And so I think when it really started to hit was like in the last inning. And we actually got, there was a hitter that game, the last batter of the game, if I remember it correctly, was Emily Friedman, and she actually ended up playing with me the following year in Chicago.
Mhm.
And great, great, awesome softball player. But she got to a 3-0 count, and so you're sitting, and I'm like, oh gosh, the perfect game's on the line. Like, I got to make sure she throws a strike. But there's also a no hitter in play, right? So Friedman swings 3-0 and grounded out to the third baseman. I don't know if it was the last out or the second to last out, but I remember that she grounded out to the third baseman. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, she bailed us out, because it was ball four, and
Right.
she swung at it. And so I think it was just, there's some moments there that were like really tense. And I remember thinking afterwards, like, dang, I should have got like the lineup card, or I should have got like some sort of like signature or something to like commemorate that moment. And I didn't, but I get to tell the story now. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, when you're dealing with a pitcher like that, I mean, like, you're just literally hoping, like, I hope I don't screw this up right now. Like, I hope I don't drop the third strike and let the runner get to first base or something like that. So you're just trying to not screw up and just let her shine, because it was incredible. I got to see her throw two. I didn't catch the second when I was a DH that game, but I mean, just watching someone who's on like that, like the
Yeah.
second one, I think was more impressive, because she had come off of she had to go fly somewhere. I think Mizuno flew her somewhere to like sign some autographs or take some pictures or whatever. And so she
Mhm.
flew in, and it was like game time was starting in an hour. And so
Right.
she like walks into the dugout. We're all like getting there ready to take batting practice. And she's in jeans, and she's like, oh my God, I forgot my cleats. Like, she had no cleats, right? So I have like we're playing on a baseball field, and they like laid out a turf strip so that she could pitch on, or
Right.
the pitchers could pitch on. And so I was like, I have my turfs if you want to wear my turfs. And she's like, well, that'll have to do right now. But she had her like traveling nanny with her that
Yeah.
would take care of her kids, because her husband was playing at the time too. And so she wore my turfs to warm up in, wore my turfs for the first inning, put on a brand new pair of cleats in the second inning, and she ended up throwing a perfect game. Like, just showed up, like just was the greatest pitcher in the world just because she showed up that day. That's how
All
good she
right,
was.
can we just acknowledge the greatness that is Jenny Finch?
Yeah.
She shows up without her shoes, her nanny in tow, coming from another work obligation, steps on the field, drops a perfect game.
Yeah. It was incredible. It was
That
incredible.
is phenomenal. Shout out to women. We never fail to impress. um, Again, transitioning, your coaching career evolved in 2010 when you founded your Indiana-based training company, Fold and Fast Pitch. And, you know, everyone goes through transitions in their career, and sometimes it's a struggle to know when it's the right time for a transition. For other people, it's very clear in their minds, this is what is right now. So for you, how did you know it was the right time to leave collegiate coaching, and what were some of the challenges of starting your own business?
Well, I left college coaching with a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. There was a pretty unfortunate like incident that happened with my previous boss. That's like, it's not worth talking about. We just didn't get along, and then it ended up being this bigger thing later on after I had quit. So I just didn't like college coaching. I didn't like it just wasn't for me. I like sleeping in my own bed at night. I'm gonna be honest with you. At that
Girl,
point in my life,
same, same.
so like being on the road all the time recruiting, and then being on the road all the time like playing. I think it's kind of funny because now I'm coaching in baseball where I'm gonna like the travel is gonna increase
Right, be insane.
exponentially. But I'm ready for that now at this point in my life, and so I think at that time I had gone to from California to college to playing pro softball, back to college, back to playing pro softball, back to now to Indiana. And I had just moved and gone for, through so many like different apartments and different dorm rooms. I think at one point I'd lived in like 10 different houses in 10 years. And I
Mhm.
was like, I'm like done with it. And so I was like, I need to just like settle down and like chill and just be able to go to work every day and come home every day. And I loved coaching. So I just started giving lessons, and you know, it was interesting because I quit college softball. I had got a job at Best Buy, a part-time job at Best Buy to kind of supplement my income. I was slinging cell phones at Best Buy, wearing the blue polo, and giving lessons on the side. And then one night a week turned into 2 nights a week, and then 2 nights a week turned into 3 nights a week. And then eventually I was just like, I don't need to work at Best Buy anymore, for
Uh-huh.
10.50 an hour. And so I just started giving lessons full time, and that just took off. And I've just started we hired some instructors last year that have done a phenomenal job. I love them so much. And so they've kind of like shouldered the workload now because I'm kind of in and out at this point. And so it's grown really well, and it's expanded. We've got like an online training platform now, and it's been awesome. So I get to coach people, which is what I want to do. I want to be in a batting cage and coach people, but I also get to like you know have a relationship with people for years and years and sleep in my own bed at night. So I'm not mad about it.
Definitely. I wonder then what your advice is for young individuals, just starting out, whether it's opening their own business or something completely unrelated to opening your own business. But that message, I'm sure, is still the same of it takes commitment. And in the beginning, your commitment was juggling Best Buy and your new business. And I'm sure it wasn't easy, but you stayed committed. So, what's your advice for young people when starting anything new and the commitment it takes to really see it through to a place that your company is now?
I think what's most important is to like lay out goals first. Like if your goal is to work in baseball, for example, right? You don't just get to walk into the door of a baseball team and say, I'd like to work for you, right? You have to be able to provide something that
Right,
that baseball program or baseball team or department or whatever it is, you have to be able to provide something that they need,
right,
that you can provide. And so I always ask people this, like, you don't get to just like get your foot in the door just because you express interest. Everybody express interest. What are you going to do? And so like for me, my goal at the beginning when I quit college softball is I'm like, okay, first goal, I have to make money. I have to
right.
live, right? So I needed to go get a part-time job. I don't care that I was just a professional softball player and an offensive MVP, and now I'm wearing a blue polo for 10.50 an hour. I don't care. Like there's no pride factor in there. I
You
got to
have to
make
take
money.
your ego out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I got to make money first. And then I have a service that I can provide, but I have to work to build it. And
Mhm,
so if that means that I got to go work for 8 hours and then I got to go work for another 8 hours on top of that to try to build my business, then that's what I have to do. And
mhm.
so, if you're super, super passionate about it and you're willing to put in the work, and in a lot of cases, it's on top of other work to build your, your rapport, to build your clientele, or to learn as much as you can, whatever it is, you have to be able to like be willing to do that and work more than the average person. And I think that becomes lost on it. I think a lot of people, especially in the sports industry, they think they work really hard because they work in sports all day, but it's like, what are you doing to separate yourself from the other 55,000 people that are doing the exact same thing as you? What are
Right.
you doing to separate yourself? And so I think, what you have to be able to provide value before you want to, go get in that business. And if that means you got to be an intern for free to get yourself some knowledge, then that's what you have to do.
Yeah, the sports industry, it's interesting, and from my perspective, we see a lot of like this microwave effect. People want instant gratification in this industry, and you know, we see certain cases from both players, coaches, reporters, whoever, who immediately skyrocket to the top. But that's the exception. The rule is that grind, that commitment, that dedication to putting in the work day in and day out to be better than your competition. You mentioned this connection earlier in our conversation with Justin Stone that you made in 2017, and it ended up playing a role in your hire with the Cubs. Can you explain the importance of building a network and, yeah, in more detail, how it impacted your career?
Sure. It goes back to that whole ego thing, right? I think as coaches, we think sometimes we're the center of an athlete's universe.
Uh-huh.
And we think that we're kind of the center of our own universe as an athlete or an ex-athlete, because for a long time we had to be.
Right.
And when you start to get into coaching, if your ego gets into play, you're literally going to be limited from day one. You will never learn a new thing. You'll just be a prisoner to what you know, and you'll think you're awesome, and you'll never go out and try to get any better. And so I think once, and I think I was a little hard headed at first because I was a very successful player. I was very good at softball. I was very good, and I wanted to show everybody, like, look, I was really good. So I'm going to show you exactly what I did, and that's going to work for you. And that's just not how it works, right? We all
Mhm.
have different paths, especially like when it comes to things like hitting and throwing and playing a sport. Like, we're built differently, we move differently, we don't weigh the same. Like, there's so many different variables. And I think once I started to understand that, and I started to go down these little rabbit holes on Twitter and on, like the internet and YouTube and all this stuff, I started to realize, like, damn, like there is so much out there that I just don't know. And
Mhm.
once I kind of just like dropped the whole I was a really good player, because honestly, to be honest, nobody cares. Like, if I can't communicate with you and build a relationship with you, they will not come back just because I used to be a good player, right?
Right.
I have to be able to provide some value to the kids and parents that I'm coaching. And so once I started to kind of just put that away and just be like, okay, I want to learn everything there is to know. And then I started to kind of figure out, okay, now I got to identify who are the smarter people than me. And there's a lot of them. And kind of align myself with them and talk to them and ask questions. Like, building networks is really, really easy. Just ask questions.
Right.
People love to talk about what they do. I think we're always afraid to like ask people for advice. It's like they literally do it for a living. They want to talk about
Talk
it. Like,
about it,
I
right?
want to, like, I love when people ask me hitting questions because I love hitting. I want to talk about it all the time. So
Right.
ask people, just ask them like, hey, what are you doing here? Is there something I can learn? Is there a way that I can set up a phone call with you? People do that to me all the time. I do that to other people all the time. So I think it just takes that like willingness to just drop your ego and say, tell me what you know, and please, like, don't be afraid to be proven wrong in that moment. And if you're
Mhm.
okay with that, then that's how you build a network.
Amazing. Amazing. Great advice. You were announced as a new hire by the Cubs in November of 2019, and quickly the world was flipped upside down. 2020 was a year of unprecedented challenges, and the pandemic had a very unique impact on minor league baseball. So, can you describe how that first year went and how you addressed the challenges that, yeah, you all saw in minor league baseball?
I don't think anyone could have ever prepared us for what was going on. You get hired and it's like you're riding this all-time high of like, it's like, oh my gosh, like you get hired, this is the job of a lifetime, this is awesome. And I got to go to work and we had 2 instructional camps and then we had 3 days of spring training, 2 or 3 days, and then boom, it was shut down. So I got to do my actual on-field job in Arizona in the pinstripes for about 6 weeks, and then everything gets shut down and you're like, okay, this will be temporary, right? And then it's just nope, it's this, and then it's this, and then it's this, and then boom, now minor league season is canceled. And
Mhm.
you're just like, oh my gosh, like, and immediately my first thought was I really feel for these guys, like for the players, kind of like what we were talking about before. Like it's almost like every single minor leaguer had an injury this year. They had limited time. um, for a lot of them, like we had a few instructional leagues that went on, but like for the most part, a lot of them haven't gotten a chance to play unless they've set something up or had, a very fortunate, like for some of our international players to play in some leagues down there and then to play, get some live at bats here and there. It's like, I just really felt for the guys, like I knew I was going to be fine just because, I didn't have like there's no timeline on my coaching career, but there's a timeline on somebody's playing career. And so immediately
Right.
it was just like very, very sad for the guys. And it's like, gosh, you lose an entire year of development in a sport where it takes years to develop. That's a rough one for a lot of these guys. So, just trying to be adaptable, buying myself out of my lease of my apartment in Arizona, moving back to Indiana so that I could work. Little by little, the world started to open up a little bit and I got to go back to work and give lessons and stuff. So that was a blessing for sure, to have a craft that you can kind of like take with you anywhere. I'm not confined to a certain area. So coming back here was a blessing for sure. But just navigating that and trying to work remotely, I think that was a big challenge too. Is like it is so much easier to work with players in person than it is to work with them through Zoom or through FaceTime or whatever it is. And you know, I learning how to transition. I think the Cubs did a great job of setting up this infrastructure where we could communicate with players and do as best as we can, but there's no substitute to being on the field, and I think we all miss it.
So you've still been able to establish those connections then with players despite essentially, like you said, losing an entire year.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really really good communication system that we use with the Cubs, and we have a great group of hitting and pitching coaches that have been able to communicate remotely. So we can send out training plans, we can send out drills, we can send out everything that we need to do very quickly, very efficiently, and just checking in with them too goes a long way, and just saying like, hey, how you doing? Just
Right.
because I mean, it takes a toll on everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like we mentioned, minor league players, they're the struggle financially of pursuing a minor league career, which obviously you hope evolves into more, is a strain. And so to have an entire year taken away, that I'm sure cut a lot of players' careers short. They were forced to make that decision. Do I stick this out or do I pursue another career earlier than I thought I previously had to?
Yeah,
So,
it had to have put a strain on a lot of people, and then there was a lot of contraction. Like there's a lot of minor league shuffling that went around, and a lot of minor league teams got dropped, and so
right.
you have a lot less jobs now too to go around. And I think baseball became more competitive,
Mhm.
but it left a lot of players in a really difficult spot. Do I do this for another year? Do I not do this for another year? I know what that feels like as a pro softball player too, because we didn't make any money either.
Right.
So I know what that feels like to be like, do I want to do this again? Put my whole life on hold to go play for $8,000. Like, is that worth it to me, or should I pursue other things that aren't going to require me to just like stop my life, go here for 3 or 4 months, for the softball season. I know what that's like, and it's a rough decision because especially like, I stopped playing. I retired when I was 25, 26, and I was still in my prime, and to
Right.
have to make that decision is rough just because financially you just can't afford to do it anymore. I understand that completely.
Yeah, you know what? That's such an interesting point because we see a lot of women's pro careers cut short due to financial reasons, not because they're unable to play. And it's an unfortunate, um, circumstance of this battle for equal play or equal pay. Sorry, I said equal play because the podcast, but um, and it's just another great proof of every stop in your career helps you to be successful at that next stop. And even though you were faced with so many challenges as a pro in fast pitch, it gave you better understanding of what your players in the minors, are going through, and essentially, ultimately made you a better coach and is making you a better coach.
For sure.
Following that up, I read an interesting line about your experience playing baseball, and it was that when you switched to softball, like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, you were grateful that the focus shifted to your play and not your gender. And you went on to say that this attention was very similar to what you experienced when you were hired by the Cubs. So, as a woman whose main focus is just being the best at your job, being the best coach you can be, how do you approach gender when it's very clearly an issue in the hiring practices in men's sports leagues?
I think the best thing that I can do, and I think this is something that I wish a lot more women would hear. Like I
Mhm.
wish this would get out. It's like number one, like you have to be good at what you do, right? Like I that women aren't getting hired for the sake of checking a diversity box,
Mhm.
right? You have to be actually capable and good at what you do. So let's start there, right? So the best way that I can represent all the women that want to get into baseball is to go out and just absolutely crush it and be good at my job. That's number one. That's the best way to do it. But the second thing is like you have to be able to have thick skin to work in this position. Um, and like, I mean, I grew up, I'm one of six. I've got four brothers. Like it's not, I've heard it all, right? I've heard it all before I got into this business,
Right.
good and bad. So like it's not, something that I think is going to like punch me in the face on a daily basis. And I do think that we have really great leadership specifically for the Cubs, like that I haven't felt unwelcome or, felt the presence of like, oh, like we have to completely pivot our conversation because now there's a woman in the room. There's been small instances here and there where it's kind of funny, but yeah, I think it's been really great and it's been really positive for the most part. But as far as like being taken seriously for your gender, like go out and crush it. The more you normalize working your butt off and being good at your job, then other people will normalize it for you. I think when we make it every time we walk into a room, it's a fist fight of I'm a woman and I need to be accepted, then that just makes everybody uncomfortable versus like, hey, I'm coming in, I need to do a good job. I need to take care of what I can take care of first, and then you'll accept me because of that. I think that's, at least for me, that's how I've chosen to approach it, and I think it's working out pretty well.
Definitely. I wonder then, because I've heard that message from a lot of women I've interviewed on this podcast, and it's a valuable point. Be good at your job, and you're good at your job, and then constantly attacking the fact that you're a woman in a man's world, it gets exhausting. But I wonder, to that point, do you see yourself as a pioneer? Do you walk into these places and spaces and see yourself as daily contributing to a change that we need to see?
Yes. I think, like I'm very aware of that, right?
Mhm.
And I'm very aware that every time that I do an interview like this or a podcast or a phone call or whatever, I'm very aware that like someone somewhere who wants to get into this business is going to see it or they're going to listen to it and they're going to really listen to what I have to say. So I'm very, very aware of that, and that does not get lost on me for sure. But I do think that, like I said before, the best way that I can, you know, give justification for my hiring and for bringing females into this business is to go out there and just do a good job.
Mhm.
That's the best way, right? I can now justify my hire, right? Because there's a lot of people that are like, I've heard it. I know what everybody out there is saying. Like, please tell
Right.
me what you know about hitting a 95 mile per hour fastball. Okay, like I get it. That's fine. I can handle all that stuff. I think if I just go out there, I do a good job. I'm, a good leader to the players. The players and I communicate well with each other, and our minor league system gets better. I think that's the best justification for bringing more women into this business, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also just have to say, I love that a lot of trolls on Twitter, on social media, who are coming at you about, have you ever hit a 95-mile-per-hour fastball? It's like, how many of you have? Like, how many of you have done that? So why are you coming at me with this energy? Wrapping up, because I can't keep you all day, although I'd love to. Um, you know, During your hiring practice, you were very direct with the Cubs about not wanting to be a hire just so that they can check a box. And like you just mentioned, you're proving that every day with your work. But was that a difficult question to ask? Were you worried about the response you were going to get in return?
No, it was important to me. So I think, when you have those opportunities to sit in front of the people that I was very fortunate to sit in front of,
Mhm.
you're I would be silly not to ask that question, I think.
Right.
I'm never going to get that opportunity again to ask that question. And I also don't want to go into a position where I'm unsure. I want to make sure everything's laid out for me, because at the end of the day, like, I think people, think that, oh, you get this job and it's like, oh, it's a job of a lifetime. You'd be stupid not to take it. But there's other things to consider, right? Like,
Right.
moving, pay. Obviously, you have to make sure that you can make a living doing what you're doing. So there's things that you have to consider, and my emotional and my mental health and that kind of stuff, making sure I'm getting into a work environment where I'm going to be treated fairly and accepted, where I don't have to go into work every day like we talked about, and it's a dogfight to be accepted and to be taken seriously. I wanted to really make sure, because I wasn't going to do that. That wasn't
Right.
going to be something that I was interested in, whether I got to wear, the royal blue and red or not. It didn't matter. I wanted to make sure that this was something that was still a good opportunity for me, because if
Definitely.
it's not a good opportunity for me, then I'm going to be in and out in 1 year. And then now, like we talked about before, there's no representation, right? So this was something that I wanted to make sure that I could do and be taken seriously and be comfortable with, because I want to do this for a long time.
You know what? I love that piece of advice, because we've all, I think, when you busted your butt, been presented opportunities that to some people are dream opportunities, but it's not a dream opportunity unless it's right. And in order to figure out if it's right, you have to ask the right questions. You have to ask the tough questions. So I love that you just shared that, because I think that's such an important lesson for our young listeners. What as Americans, I think we're obsessed with this highlight reel image, and everything looks so great, everything looks so easy once they've gotten to this position, and that is just not true. We all know that there's so much that goes into being successful, whether it's as a coach, as a player, as a journalist, whatever. So I wonder for you, what lesson has taken you the longest to learn but had the most significant impact on your career trajectory?
Ooh, that's a good question. Most difficult to learn. Um, I think the most difficult to learn and the best thing I've ever done is just accepting that I don't know everything, and also not being afraid to tell somebody when I don't know something.
Uh-huh.
I remember filling out a questionnaire for this position when I was, being interviewed, or like at least going through the interview process. And part of it was a questionnaire, and it was like, here was all these questions, and there was like two or three questions on there where I was like, I have no idea what the hell that means. I have no idea what the hell that is. And it's like, okay, so I could try to BS my way through it, or I could just admit and be like, I don't know, but
Mhm.
I'd love to learn. I'd love to find out. Being okay with the phrase I don't know goes a long way. And just like the phrase I'm sorry, goes a long way. Admitting when you're wrong or admitting when you don't know something. Like for me, that's been a huge part of my growth, not only as a coach and professionally, but personally as well. I think it just opens the lines of vulnerability between me and any other person, whether it's somebody that I'm coaching, somebody that I'm in a relationship with my family, no matter what it is. I think not be or being okay with not knowing everything, or being okay with not doing everything right, I think is has been a huge part of my development as a person.
I wish I had a buzzer right here. So every time you dropped a gem, I could just like nail it so people knew to pay attention, because you're hitting us with all the good stuff. Um, 2021, we have a lot to be hopeful for. The vaccine is being rolled out, and although there are still many challenges that face us, I'm hopeful, and I think a lot of people are hopeful, that a more standard way of living and operating is coming soon. So for you, how excited are you to get 2021 season underway and return to a more standard way of coaching?
I mean, I just want to be able to like go through the grind of a season. I got some pretty like good opportunities in instructional league in the past January and February, and then with my limited time in Arizona at the complex. But I'd really like to know what this whole grind of a baseball season is all about. I played softball, but our seasons were like 55 games. So going through a season of a grind, an 8-month season, I'm really looking forward to that. I wish that I would like let's get in, and I want to dive in. So that's the part I'm looking forward to the most. Just understanding what that's like and getting some experience under my belt for sure.
She's not looking forward to being away from her bed, but she is looking forward to the grind
Well,
that is
I'll be in rookie league in Arizona, so I'll sleep in the same bed just about every night.
okay.
So we'll
There we
be all
go.
right.
It,
Yeah,
it
we'll be
won't
all
be
right.
her bed in Indiana, but it'll be her bed she's going home to.
Yeah.
Rachel, lastly, I end every episode with this question. What do you hope the future looks like for women in sports, and more specifically, women in baseball?
I think continued opportunities is going to be paramount for women in sports. I think we all are very accepting of the fact that women play sports. We're not in like the 1930s and 40s where like if you played a sport, you were seen as some like ostracized member of society. I think we're all very, very accepting of females in sports, which is awesome. I just hope that the our daughters always get the same opportunities as our sons. From a pathway to being a millionaire. That would be awesome. I would love
Right.
that. Or from like, hey, the quality of your youth coaching is the same whether you play baseball or you play softball, or whether you play men's basketball or women's basketball. It's not like the men get all the good opportunities and the good training opportunities, and then the women just kind of get what's left over here. And I think that is definitely starting to change. But I think it's going to start at a youth level. Obviously, you see it from the top down. That's going to help youth coaches try to do more things like the higher levels. So I think this is definitely helping, but I would love to see a world where our sons and daughters get the same opportunities and the same pathways to success. I think that's just something that we haven't had yet, and it's the gap is closing, but it's still a very large gap. So I would love to see that definitely get to an equal playing field where people are valuing and treasuring their daughters and their sports opportunities as much as they're treasuring their sons' opportunities.
Well, man, Rachel, I'm going to hit you up 20 years from now, and hopefully that gap is minuscule, and we could have a coffee, a beer, and laugh about and smile about how far we've come. But Rachel,
Absolutely.
sounds like a plan to me. But Rachel, thank you so much for the time that you've given CBEA and Equal Play. It was a joy to dive into this conversation with you and get some of your feedback and insight. And like I said, the gems, they were great. So on behalf of CBEA and Equal Play, thank you so much for coming on this episode.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I was very excited to do this, and let's do it again.
Yeah, man, we have to, and we'll check in after the season. I mean, I want to hear how this season goes, and obviously, the Cubs are one of the best teams in terms of coverage for the Sun Times. So I'm definitely going to stay in touch, and we'll get some more stories published throughout the season.
Sounds perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel.
All right. Thank you.
All right. See you.